Hello there, Brandon here. I realize that in this episode, we tell you about creating an email in Patreon, but we really don't tell you what they are, only that they're linked in the description. Now, if you're like me, you're listening to podcasts while you're working or doing shit, and you're really not looking at the links in the description. That's fine. I do it all the time. That's why I'm taking the liberty right now, before the episode starts, to tell you that our email is the Nerd Archivist 89, all one word, the Nerd Archivist 89 at gmail.com, and you can find our Patreon under the Nerd Archivists. Thank you, and enjoy the episode. Hello, and welcome back to our last episode of the season for the Nerd Archivist. My name is Brandon.
And I'm Dakota.
And we are your hosts today. And we are doing the last episode for Dead Space.
We're going to crack this thing wide open. We are going to give you all the spoilers, all the hints, the tips, the tricks. We're going to delve deep into the lore and tell you about the cosmic horror series Dead Space.
We're gonna pop the cork, as Hammond would say. So, firstly, we want to get into New Game Plus and talk about that. So, after you beat the game, everyone always gets the same ending, which is Isaac is a little frazzled, as one would say, just escaping all of the shit coming down and killing the hive mind. He gets into his spaceship and he's flying off and he's like, oh, that was crazy. And then you hear this voice is like, I know, I wish I had someone to talk to about this. And he turns and looks to his left and his dead wife is in the fucking chair. And she's like, blah! And it's like a big scare. So, New Game Plus opens and you can start New Game Plus. So, here's the thing about New Game Plus. New Game Plus brings two things. One are these slightly darker red enemies with glowing eyes. They are a bitch to kill. One of them will easily take most of your ammo to finish. I've learned to cycle through what I have just so I don't waste ammo using one particular gun. Sometimes you'll get one or two. They do come in brutes. That sucks too. And they will be kind of scattered throughout the game to make it a little more harder. And that's on normal mode. That's not even on, like, impossible mode or the hard mode. Now, you have marker fragments. So, if you remember in Matthias's, I think it was Matthias's room.
Yeah, Captain Matthias.
There is a giant table with all these little circles on it and a candle. And if you interact with it, this voice, I think, says, like, make us whole or something along that.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. Also, dear listeners, I apologize if you hear some jingling sounds. That is our cat walking around. I bought a new soundboard, and it literally picks up everything now. Like, nothing is off the table for you to hear.
Yeah, if you've been following along, we have been, I'm sure you can tell our quality of recording has upgraded.
Ooh, that was a little loud.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we've been figuring this out as we've been doing it. It's been a learning process, but we've also been, we're just regular people. I think we've said this before. We have a lot going on, and, we're just kind of rolling with it. But so far, this has been absolutely fantastic, and I hope that you've enjoyed what we've been putting forward.
Yes, and we have a Patreon to plug at the end, too, but we'll get to that at the end. Right now, we got that table, and we got these random little holes on it. So, when you start New Game Plus, you will notice, and I believe the first one is in the Maintenance Bay office in Chapter 1, but you come across a marker fragment. Now, there are 12 marker fragments you have to find. And all of this is on the Ishimura up to Chapter 10, I believe, or 11. Up to Chapter 11, because the last one is in the cargo bay. And you have to collect all of those and then take it back to Matthias's room. And then you put the marker fragments on, and that's how you get the second ending. Now, these little marker fragments are all over the fucking place. We have, so the 12 locations, we have the maintenance bay office, Dr. Kine's office. In medical, it's in, like, when you move the thing out of the way, you see it in there, kind of floating. It's, like, kind of hidden, I think.
Yeah.
But you can, like, bring it to you. There's one in the engine room, which is where it's not the engine room, but in that area, it's in the centrifuge.
Oh yeah, that's
you gotta get it before you turn the centrifuge on because it's floating up in that giant mass of like necrotic flesh that just like destroyed the bridge at the top. You gotta fly up in there and it's hidden in there somewhere. I believe. No, that's the one in the communications hub. In the communications hub, there's a big hole.
In the comms array.
Yeah, in the comms array. But there's one in the engine room, break room, Dr. Mercer's office. Of course, he would have one.
Yep.
Crazy psychotic bastard. Then we have one in cryogenics, the East Grow chamber, mineral samples, and again, the communications hub. That will be in the comms array where you float around. You'll look for a giant hole of necrotic flesh, and that's where you'll find it there. The deluxe quarters, the inquiry desks, and then lastly the cargo bay kind of floating around in there. You will want to get all of these before you leave because you will not be able to come back for them once you leave the Ishimura.
Yeah, so you get all of those and you return them to the captain's desk and you will unlock a secret ending that is only in the remake. And again, the marker fragments are only in the remake. So you need to pay attention. If you're following along with us, make sure you have the remake because the original Dead Space is just vanilla in comparison.
Yeah, it won't have any of this. So when you get the secret ending, I love the secret ending because it really shows just how broken Isaac is as a character. Like he is just full on off his fucking rocker and he's gone crazy. So he's in the ship flying off. He has this like crazed smile on his face. He kind of makes me think a little bit of that like 1950s father that's just like, hi honey, I'm home. Yep, it's been a hard day at work today. Real crazy. And he's just like sitting here just smiling and just doing all the things, getting the ship ready. And you hear this voice, and as it starts to pan away from him, you start to see, so the crazy writing is called hypergraphia, which is a mental, it's like a mental psychosis where you are impulsed to just write continuously, scribble continuously. You have that all over, like all of the alien writing is all over the inside of the ship. And she's like, honey, are we going home? And he's like, dear, no, not yet. We have something, I still have to go build something.
Yep. And then that brings us back to the marker. And so Isaac, this alludes to Isaac actually wanting to go build a marker. Mm-hmm. And canonically, it is widely accepted that this is actually the true ending. And mm-hmm. This is why Isaac ends up in the situation he's in at the beginning of Dead Space 2.
Yes.
So something that we've talked about is that the marker will seek out the more intelligent people or people that have the type of intelligence that will allow it to self-reproduce. Mm-hmm. Thus, the markers are somewhat sentient.
So interesting. I was reading or watching a video on this. So apparently the original black marker actually couldn't create necromorphs. Through the course of psychosis, one of the doctors studying it, I forget his name, but he got convinced with a dead necromorph that had washed ashore to eat that flesh, and by eating the necrotic flesh from the necromorph, he then turns into an infector, and that's how they were able to start infecting and creating new necromorphs with the black marker. But the red markers, they already have that ability.
Oh yeah, so this goes back to a big theory, and honestly, I really would pretty much consider it the actual story at this point. The whole make us whole thing, terrible sentence. The whole make us whole thing actually refers to returning the marker to the pedestal. So if you remember at the last part of the game, you go through a lot of rooms where you're just moving the marker around. And it's not so much of a puzzle, it's pretty straightforward, but there's a lot of things that try to kill you while you're trying to do this. And this again goes back to the fact that the necromorphs are not necessarily controlled so much by the marker. They kind of just act in a chaotic fashion. They tend to move towards convergence, so they form a hive mind. Thus, the hive mind that you fight at the end of the game, or the mini hive mind, the Leviathan. Sorry. And so this marker supposedly actually doesn't have the power to create a full convergence event and thus create. No?
No, I was agreeing with you.
Oh,
It
yeah,
doesn't.
So yeah, it doesn't have the full power to create what we eventually see in the later games as a brother moon, and we'll come back to that. So the whole idea is that this whole repeating theme of creating convergence or making us whole, they're actually sort of opposed. So you have the unitologists who want a form of convergence, i.e. all of this dead biomass coming together, becoming sentient around the marker, and then doing its bidding. Then you have the marker itself, which wants to be returned to its pedestal, because the marker with the pedestal is what actually makes it powerful. The marker without the pedestal is just kind of wild and free. And coming back into this theme, I do want to point out that if you know Dead Space thoroughly when you play the game, from the very first 5 seconds, not even like 3 seconds of the game, Isaac is absolutely bonkers before he even comes in contact with the marker and he steps foot on the Ishimura.
So something we were talking about before the podcast started, and I'd been watching a couple videos on, was the idea of cosmic horror within Dead Space. And so as a theme, generally, if the characters aren't already crazy, they will go crazy as the story progresses, as they learn about themselves and what they're capable of doing. And with the end with them either dying or just being like full on off their rocker. So Isaac, coming into this, is actually already fucking crazy because he... So this is something that I thought was really neat too, because I never actually paid attention to where the video was in point when he was watching it. But what she's saying in the video at the opening of the game is that everything is falling apart, everything's so crazy, and then it kind of cuts off. But the point that it cuts off is right when she's going into talking about like meeting Mercer, and then she pulls out the needle and injects herself. He's already watched this video. He already knows she's dead. Yeah.
Also, I'd like to point out, and this is an Easter egg throughout all the games, if you don't already know, every single first letter of the chapters in the Dead Space spell out Nicole is dead.
What? I didn't actually know that.
I went back and I even looked at my notes right here, and I actually realized, yeah. And the D for dead is chapter 9, Dead on Arrival. But all the chapters spell out Nicole is dead. The game tells you, and this is like some fourth wall kind of shit. But yes, and then the other Dead Spaces also, their chapters spell out certain things.
Really?
Let me see, what is it? Oh yeah, in Dead Space 3, it's, what is it? Requiem, Infidels, and Perdition, R.I.P. And so that goes into something else, which I'll do a quick tangent on in just a couple seconds. Apparently at the end of Dead Space 3, it is left unknown whether Isaac is actually dead or not. And I believe, what's her name, Eileen?
I think, God, it's been so long. I started Dead Space 3 or 2 years ago, I think,
Yeah.
because I wanted to play through all of them. I had heard good things about 2, so I played through 2, and then I wanted to finish up with 3. But I'm going to be real honest. 3 was fucking boring as shit.
Well,
It was really hard to get through. I ended up not finishing it.
Yep. It also killed the series.
It really
to be
did.
fair, that and the fact that it had so many microtransactions, and it's just EA being greedy and being EA that kind of killed it, to be honest.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
I'm going to say the people that work for EA are great, but EA itself definitely ruined a lot of really, really good franchises.
Turns out there's a trend in big gaming corporations ruining really good franchises. Some would say maybe Konami did the same thing with Silent Hill.
Strange.
Hot take.
Speaking of big corporations, I did some deep digging. Sorry, guys, we're going on a big tangent right now. We're really losing it.
Hell yeah.
So there's another fan theory that Battlefield, if you're familiar with the Battlefield franchise,
Okay.
Battlefield is actually canon in Dead Space.
What?
And so Battlefield obviously is more in our times than before. So apparently, especially, I think it's, Battlefield 2042?
The newest one? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but anyway, and in that one and other Battlefields, I believe, at least that one, there is actually a monument in a fountain that is a marker.
What?
Yeah, I mean, it's made out of concrete. It doesn't look like a Dead Space marker, but
All right,
it is
this
the
might
same
be my reason to go back
shape.
to...
It's the same shape. You can just Google it really quick and you'll find a screenshot. Also, CEC exists in that Battlefield. Yeah.
Okay. This may be a good reason to boot back up 2042 and play it again. Find out.
At least there's plenty of ammo in that one.
Yeah. Well, you do get a lot of ammo if you only stick to one gun.
Speaking of crossovers with these companies, 2 things, and then we'll kind of get back on track. Sorry, this is the fun episode, so you guys are just on the roller coaster with us.
We have guidelines we're following right now.
Guidelines. So there is a reference to Dead Space in a game that was made the year before the release of Dead Space. So we're talking 2007, and same development team, and it was a Simpsons game. It's literally called The Simpsons Game. It's the most boring title for a game you could possibly imagine. Anyway, at one point, there is a poster for an upcoming movie called Dead Waste, and there's an obvious photo of Isaac on the front of it. So they were just already dropping Easter eggs for their upcoming horror game releasing the next year.
They would have had the money to do that, too.
Also, in Dead Space 2, I don't know if many people have noticed this, but there is a Rubik's Cube on the desk when Isaac is being interviewed by the officer, and it's actually covered in the same writing, and it looks like the same material that the markers have. And so it's a tiny little detail that a lot of people miss, but the folks that have noticed it think that it might be some type of tool used to figure out whether someone has been properly affected by the marker to be able to perhaps create a new one. As in, they would intuitively know how to align it to its proper sequence to cause some kind of effect.
Fascinating. I'm gonna have to go back and play Dead Space 2. Which, sad day, EA decided not to, do a Dead Space 2 remake. I don't give a shit about 3 remake. That shit's out of here. But 2 would have been fucking awesome. Also, into the Halo jump that everyone talks about, they actually do that again in what's the new one? I can't believe I'm blanking on it. Protocol.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Hold on, I'm gonna Google this. I need to know.
Help us, Lord Google.
Help us, Lord Google, figure this out.
I'm just gonna go on a tangent. There is one little secret that comes up in the remake. I don't know if it's in the original, correct me if I'm wrong, but there are baby dolls scattered around the Ishimura, and if you interact around them, like stomping or melee, they will actually start crying.
I heard something about this. Because I wanted to find more secrets in Dead Space when I first played it. So every time I saw a doll or some particular thing, I tried to like throw it or shoot it to see if anything would happen. But I don't think I ever got the crying. Maybe I did. I don't know. The game gets really creepy, and it's hard to tell what is and isn't in that game.
Yeah, the whole soundscape, as we talked about previously, is fantastic.
Callisto Protocol. So in Callisto Protocol, there is a segment in the game, kind of midway through, where you do something like where they recycled the Halo jump, and you're falling from the prison to this other structure underneath, and you got to like dodge through all these things as you're falling. And like the entire time I was playing this, I was like, wow, this is kind of like the Halo jump, just not nearly as tight. It's so easy to like fuck up in this one. But yeah, anyways, getting back on track. So yeah, Isaac is already kind of off his rocker. He's pretty much crazy, and the marker takes advantage of that, allowing him to see his dead wife, giving him like this. He kind of just gives in to the marker and is like, you know what? Yeah, maybe my wife is alive. Maybe she didn't kill herself.
Yeah, he's already kind of blacked out that part of his memory, in my opinion. But going in and with like the markers sort of like temptation, you know, because I mean, there is definitely a little bit of pull from Dante's Inferno, right? Kind of going through. Anyway, yeah. So he is one of many characters which we've talked about before recording of Cosmic Horror series that has suffered a serious trauma and kind of is going in already broken. So he's ripe to get his mind just kind of taken over and happily kind of be coerced. I mean, it's showing him his dead wife.
And that's what the marker is actually designed to do. So there are processes with this because it does. It picks out who's going to be the necrotic flesh and who's going to be a builder for the new markers. And so through this process, it essentially breaks you down psychologically, especially if you are going to become like a hunter or an infector or something like that. Part of the process, much like Cosmic Horror, much like the theme in things like it makes me think a lot of like watching that Ari Aster horror movie that's so goddamn good. What is that movie?
Hereditary?
Hereditary!
There we go.
So, minor spoilers for Hereditary. But part of the process of bringing that demon lord into being possess this boy's body is they have to break him psychologically. And to break him psychologically, they bring him to the brink, like causing him lots of pain, horror, all that kind of shit. Because he was already kind of like a pretty decent mellow boy. They were like, nah, man, he's got to be like...
He needs to be completely psychologically broken.
So they just like... So through the whole movie, they afflict him with a bunch of shit. That's essentially what the marker does to people in their minds. Like, and then you have the unitologists that help that along a lot more in their culty ways. So so the marker essentially breaks down him even further. So two things that are also really important in this too. The two messages he gets from Nicole, one being the one where they're talking and she's like, oh, thank you for talking me into like staying on this ship, for taking this job. The Ishimura is so great. And he's like, yeah, honey, I knew you'd love it. And then like they move on. But then right after that, you find another message where they get into a fight where he's telling Nicole that his mother died. And she's like, I'm so sorry, fuck the unitologists, because they took the bodies before he could do anything about it. And he essentially was like, stop. It's your fault. You practically killed them with your mental assessment of them. And she was like, what? And then just like essentially was like, you know what? Fuck you, Isaac. And then just turns it off. And he was like, no, please don't leave me. And then it just cuts to quiet. No, she also uses the phrase, You talked me into going to the Ishimura. What the fuck, dude?
Oh yeah, I don't know if we talked about this yet, but a little side bit is Nicole for a very long time has helped people escape unitology. So she's very much against it. Isaac isn't a unitologist. I don't think he really cares. I think he just comes across as completely neutral because, you know, he's supposed to be the player character, obviously. Then his parents were unitologists, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, his parents were unitologists. He was in it for a little bit, and then he kind of broke off, and then he got back into it because I think Nicole for a little bit was, and then Nicole got out of it, and she was like, "No, fuck this." And I think he stayed in the middle because of his parents.
Yeah.
But Nicole pretty much just picked up on the like bad vibes right off the bat.
Oh yeah, and something other about unitology is I think very, very clearly it is a rip on Scientology, and this was even said by the developers if I remember correctly. But because like unitology, Scientology is, you know, populated by very rich, very powerful people, and they were kind of worried that they would get a cease and desist or some kind of legal action taken, so they stopped comparing it to unitology and just said that it was a parody of a cult in general.
Also, what cosmic horror story isn't without its crazy worshippers and cultists?
I'm just going to give some examples with some broken protagonists and also maybe some recommendations for some good watches. Event Horizon.
Oh, yes.
Dr. Weir, his wife committed suicide. Spoiler alert, sorry. And so he goes into a situation where people's minds are messed with on a haunted spaceship. So if you've never seen it, it's really good. Sam Neill, fantastic performer. He's the lead role. He plays Dr. Weir. One of the grossest, goriest movies.
Also, he plays Dr. Grant from Jurassic Park.
Spoiler alert. Let's see what else is out there. The Void, talking about cults. The Void is a wonderful, grisly, low budget, recent enough horror movie. It's got nothing but practical effects. It's got creatures very reminiscent of necromorph type creatures. Very, very H.P. Lovecraft inspired.
And not a movie, but a game. But I can't help but to also reference Silent Hill 2. I was listening. I never really thought about the connections between the two until I was listening to a podcast talking about Silent Hill 2. And as they were getting to the end of the game, I was thinking like, wow, some of these themes are like really fucking similar to Dead Space 2, as both stories involve a psychologically broken protagonist running from the fact that their wife is dead and playing through all manners of psychological horror only to be confronted with that themselves and to realize that they kind of played a part in this, you know?
And in that one, James sees not his dead wife, but basically a clone of his dead wife. And so, yeah, that Silent Hill is very similar.
Also, same, yeah. Isaac sees a clone of his dead wife.
Yep.
Not a clone, but like the marker twists cross to look like his wife.
And one last one before we jump back into it, but if you've never seen In the Mouth of Madness by John Carpenter, it's absolutely fantastic. It is a little bit of a slow burn, but that third act really, really, really pays off, and it is taken almost directly from the pages of H.P. Lovecraft with a very big influence by Stephen King. So if that sounds up your alley and you want to see, again, Sam Neill get completely psychologically broken down by this, and he at the end is scribbling all over the walls.
Dude, what was Sam Neill not in the 90s? Jesus Christ.
Yeah, he was in so many good things.
Prolific. So, kind of switching gears, let's talk about the Ishimura. Also, real quickly. Apparently, the guy to whom the ship is named after, Ishimura himself, was, I was going to say Scientologist, was a unitologist.
Oh
Mmm.
boy.
Yeah. So, little interesting fact there. But yeah, let's talk about the Ishimura. Let's talk about, because most of the game takes place on this giant ass ship, except for the last chapter where you're on Aegis 7. But you really don't see a lot of Aegis 7. You just see a bunch of like dead rock. You see a lot of Ishimura though.
Oh yeah, so I've told y'all before. I think in the first episode, actually in the first episode, the Ishimura is about a mile long, and it is about a tenth of a mile high.
It's a big ass ship.
It's huge. It's basically a floating city, and it has to be. I mean, it has to sustain hundreds, if not thousands, of people. I'm not sure what the capacity was or how many people it had on board, but I know for a fact that it was large enough not to just carry crew members, but to also carry the families of the crew members.
Yeah, they had like their own welcoming area. Like the flight deck was literally a flight lounge for people, not just like cargo carriers coming back and forth from the planet to the ship, but also for people visiting their families. Because again, they were gone for like 6 months. This is a huge ordeal. It takes a long time to break down a planet.
Yeah, and that's another thing I like about the remake is the again the zero coming back to zero gravity. The moving around is great, but also when you're in areas
so good.
like the centrifuge or the comms array, you really get a sense of how small you are. You're a little ant crawling around this really, really massive structure, just floating in space. I mean, this thing takes out huge chunks of planets. It literally destroys planets with gravity.
And like, I feel like you really get a sense for that too in the mining chapter when you have to dislodge that giant asteroid and you have to fly outside of the ship. And if you're like me, you just flew straight up and then turned around and you're like, oh, all these little tiny areas. But then as you get closer, you realize how big they actually are. And you're like, oh, wow, this is like a very small portion of a really big ship. I really flew the fuck far out there. Wow, this thing is huge.
Plus the fact that the remake adds the actual continual hallway, so you can actually walk from one end of the ship to the other. And again, no loading screens, so you know if you had enough time and you had a strong bladder, you could just one shot the entire game from start to finish.
So that's one thing that I really liked about the game design with the ship is that you really felt like the ship was alive because you were able to traverse all areas. And if you did the side quests, which you should, because they do things like add like, so if you follow the necrotic flesh that you get from the hunter, if you follow that and scan it, you'll find out that Mercer was working on shit, and that'll give you like a little added thing to your stasis where the stasis also peels the skin off of the people you stasis with. You get really important little tidbits, not just like story clues, but they do reward you with really good shit in the game. But also you gotta go back through the ship, and you really get a sense for the scale of the ship and the design as you traverse back and forth through it. It's a beautiful ship. Like, it's a beautiful design.
It feels lived in.
Yes.
Yeah, there's the attention to detail really goes a long way in this, and that you really feel like this was a place that people, you know, they worked 9 to 5 in, and then they had a lounge. You know, they hung out afterwards. You got to see the bunks. You got to see the bathrooms. I mean, there really wasn't any detail that was spared when it comes to putting this whole thing together. I mean, people in their desks, their offices, they have their own decorations, and they're all kind of tailored to those specific people.
There was a lot of narrative storytelling in the game design as well. One of the things I really enjoyed about traversing through the game is watching the ship slowly decay like going to the break room. I believe it's the break room. Over time decays and gets collected by corruption, which is just a mass of like necrotic flesh that is being recombined into a bigger organism. And you see that build up throughout the ship as well, like watching places that looked very nice. I wouldn't say clean, but nice. Just start to break down and get covered in necrotic flesh. Very creepy.
Yeah, there's a lot of times that you'll come back to places. Good example, medical.
Mm-hmm.
When you come back to medical, there's bodies on the ground. And I just want to link this back to when we're talking about Isaac's mental state. There's a very good chance that he was actually hallucinating that some survivors were necromorphs.
I never thought about that.
And you actually just see them as necromorphs, and so you just kill them like you would a necromorph. But why are there no humans in medical until you come back after killing everything in medical? And then there's human corpses on the ground, aka building blocks for the marker.
Yes, the necrotic flesh. Turns out you can't actually kill necromorphs because they're already dead. But what they do after you cut off their arms and legs is they just recombine with other necrotic flesh and just give themselves to the bigger mass. You can't actually kill it because it just keeps recombining into something different. Man, that's so good.
Yeah.
I really like that lore. I like how the lore plays into the gameplay as well as you actually see this happen throughout the game. I like the progression because, like, through the game you're like, what the fuck is this like tumor-looking shit that's like growing on the walls? And then you fight the Leviathan for the first time. You're like, oh, it's this big fucking thing.
Yeah, and of course, you have your corridor tentacle too.
Mm-hmm.
Couple of fun facts.
Corridor tentacle. With the face in the hand.
Yes.
The screamy
face.
face.
The nightmare tentacle. The third Dead Space is the only one that features co-op, but originally Dead Space was meant to be a co-op game.
Mm-hmm.
You have the option to play couch co-op with a friend, but because of time restraints of them trying to get this game out, they had to just 86 that. Also, another fun fact for you big nerds out there, the game engine that Dead Space is built in is the same game engine from PGA. Yes, Dead Space is created in a golf game engine.
I mean, it is an EA game.
Yeah, it's an EA game.
They are known for their sports games and their golf games.
Speaking of games, just a little divergence here. There are a lot of Dead Space games out there that you might not know about. There was a kind of short-lived phone Dead Space game that some of you might have played.
What is this game called?
Oh, let's see.
I've heard of this game. I haven't played it. I don't even think I've seen game footage of it.
I have it somewhere. Is it? No. Where did it go? Hold on. I have it written down somewhere. Oh, there it is. So there's an iOS Android game that was really, really blowing up in 2011, and it's actually set between Dead Space 1 and Dead Space 2. The protagonist is a female this time, Carrie Norton. She's sent to the Titan Station as an agent of the Church of Unitology, and she's meant to commit sabotage on this station. What she ends up doing is actually unleashing necromorphs, and then her mission turns into a fight for survival.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the very end of it, pretty much she's dead. For one reason or another, she's dead. Whether she got stabbed and killed by a necromorph or she may have did it herself. This game only was around for 4 years. And again, she's wearing the engineer armor in this game. And after you release the necromorphs, she ends up trying to prevent a meltdown of the station's power source.
Oh my, yeah, I'm looking at screens of this. Oh man.
I mean, it looks really good for a phone game.
Yeah, it doesn't look bad. What year did this come out?
2011. So if
that was not bad for 2011.
If you did actually play through that, I'm not sure exactly how because I didn't do it myself and I was a little lacking in this area of research, but you did unlock some special rooms in Dead Space 2. I don't know if it was a code you got for completing that mobile game, but yeah, you got some special locked rooms that contained some audio logs, some text logs, and then a
Oh, that's
couple
fascinating.
pieces of merchandise for you to walk around with.
Well, I wonder because did Dead Space come out in 2011 as well? 2011 or 2012? 2012?
Maybe the third one. They came out pretty close together, actually.
Yeah. Let's take a little dive on Wikipedia. Wikipedia
I
knows
want to say
everything.
Dead Space 3 was 2013.
2011 was Dead Space 2.
Yeah.
So yeah, 2011, 2012. Because I remember someone talking about how 2011, 2012 was the year where every game had to have like a scene where you got trapped upside down and you had to shoot things while you were upside down. And I'm like, oh yeah, that was my time marker for knowing about Dead Space 2 because you do get turned upside down and you have to shoot necromorphs until you unlock yourself.
I will say that is one of my favorite parts about The Last of Us.
Oh yeah, the upside down part.
They perfected that. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it is Naughty Dog. They're real good at that. They do partake in crunch time, and those poor developers really get shit on. But man, do they make some pretty fucking games.
Oh, they make some amazing games. And then again, they go above and beyond to hide little Easter eggs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe someday in the future we will do The Last of Us. Maybe.
Just maybe. So yeah, you got some skins, some audio logs for playing that game. Another fun fact. I just saw it on my page here. So there's a handful of necromorph designs that are in the game files, but they never actually appeared on screen.
Really?
Yeah. So the infector was originally supposed to be. It took the place of a flyer, was what they kind of codenamed it, and so it was a necromorph that would try to kill you, but it was actually flying, and they realized that due to the constraints of the controls at the time, it was actually really, really difficult to kill this thing, and so they nixed it and created the infector, which they do look pretty similar.
The infectors look like giant bat people.
Yep. There was also there was another one called the Commander, and kind of think like necromorphy, kind of like Carnage with like longer limbs, sort of looking thing, like bipedal but like leaned over, and so that one actually got scrapped. You can still find the files if you know what you're doing, but that one got scrapped and replaced by the Brutes.
Really?
So they just kind of went for a different design angle.
I think they had something similar to that in Dead Space 2. I think it's like the first boss you fight is this weird, giant bipedal thing that walks and it's real langly. And you have to shoot the like little yellow nodes on its body, like the weak points.
Yeah, I think they kind of recycled it. There's also a strange piece of lore and another necromorph type that got slightly changed. So you know the snipers, the heads that have the 3 tentacles and they'll shoot spikes at you.
Yeah, the little dead babies.
Yeah. So
Baby necromorphs.
originally they were supposed to be cats. They were supposed to be necromorph cats because in Dead Space lore,
You can get necromorphed animals.
yes, but also the most popular cat in space is a hairless cat. Or the most popular pet in space, rather. And it's because their hair doesn't shed because they don't have it, and therefore it doesn't clog the ventilation system of the ship. So everyone in Dead Space has hairless cats in space if they want a pet. Fun fact.
Really?
And so, yeah, it was supposed to be a necromorphed cat. And I guess maybe its tail kind of mutated, and that's what was shooting at you?
I again going back to like the 2000 the early 2000s edge like edgy shit. I feel like they probably made the guess that like, well, maybe necromorphed babies is a little more edgier than necromorphed cats.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have the again going back to Silent Hill, the necromorphs are obviously tied in with Resident Evil zombies or any zombie, but the way that they're twisted and contorted human forms definitely goes to Silent Hill. You start with a human base and you make something out of it that kind of has some kind of, well, in Silent Hill it's all kind of like moral and stuff. It's supposed to represent some type of part of the human psyche. Necromorphs are a little bit more purpose built.
Yes. They are made to do one thing and one thing only, and that is kill and create more necrotic flesh. If you can't be turned into something, you will just decompose and be rearranged in the giant Leviathan mass. But you will play a purpose, goddammit. You will do a thing.
There was some fun stuff. I didn't even know about this, and I wish I did at the time, but I wasn't as much of an avid gamer. In 2010, Dark Souls... Dark Souls. Dead Space.
We're thinking about Dark Souls?
I'm thinking about Dark Souls for some reason. I played a little bit of the new Souls-like that's out. I can't remember what it's called.
Enoria? In Austria?
It's like the Fallen, or it's not...
Oh, Lords of the Fallen.
Lords of the Fallen, yes. I played a little bit of that recently, and so, yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, there was a kill competition for Dark Souls 2. And so you basically sent them the most brutal necromorph kill that you could, like, or how you would be killed. You see, like, I mean, we haven't really talked about this, but there are some gruesome death animations as a character. You'll get split in half, you'll get your head chopped off. A lot of really, really nasty, not good things will happen to Isaac when you die. And you'll probably see that a few times, or you probably have seen it a lot if you've been playing along with us. So, just for amateurs to design something. And as a winner of the contest, you would actually be featured in the game. And so the guy that won, he got the best kill animation that he sent in. And he was, I can't remember the name of the character, but there's a guy that's trying to climb into an elevator with you at some point, and then it drops and he gets kind of sliced up. So, yeah. But that was a fun little sidebar. Maybe we should talk about the some of the big characters that appear in the story. Or the stories. Because we could start in the middle and we could go back and we can go forward, because this is a big, long story of lore. I mean, the marker itself goes back to prehistoric days. And then you have the gentleman that found it.
Yeah, so where we're at in the game currently within the lore world, we have our main players. We have kind Mercer. We have the kind people of the CEC coming in to like repair the ship. A simple repair job wasn't actually so simple. And we have Nicole and Matthias. And a couple other people you hear here and there, like Temple crosses in. And you kind of just see how the marker like takes advantage of their like insecurities and their kind of weak points, I guess. Like Mercer, I don't know if Mercer was always kind of a crazy person, but I definitely feel like he was probably a very greedy person, because I feel like the marker really twisted that to his like want for power and his lust for like...
Well, also the marker made him create the hunter.
That's right. I didn't even think about that.
So he had the type of intelligence that would let the marker create something more useful to it.
That's why he was experimenting with all the bodies. He was literally
on regeneration.
Yes. So that is a thing you'll find a lot of notes on throughout the story, as Mercer will talk about his process. and how he will take certain people and take them aside and start working on them. He'll dissect them, introduce them to certain things, and give them injections, which I'm guessing those injections are probably like necrotic flesh and shit from other necromorphs that he's just injecting into them and seeing what it does to them. I imagine he was already kind of an unstable person to begin with, and the marker just kind of like tweaked that a little more and just pushed him a little over the edge.
Yeah, I haven't looked into the lore of how he actually made the hunter, but the ships did create clones.
They did, yes.
And that's when you go, that's a little area of the ship called the Limb Replacement Center.
Yeah, so that's actually, so those little like creatures you were talking about earlier
Yeah.
that used to be cats but are now babies. So in the limb regrowal area, they also have little babies for just in case they lose members. Those babies are clones that can just regrow that person and they can just go back to working again. Because, capitalist hellscape.
Yeah, from what I understand, they would also supposedly these babies they had a rapid growth hormone so that they would mature quickly, and once they reach the age of the person, because working for a mining operation, apparently you lose a lot of limbs or organs, and so they would just rip the limbs or organs off of this clone and just graft them onto you,
Interesting.
and then toss that clone in the trash.
So one thing I wonder about too then, because you have you have the necromorphs that are covered in clothes, but then you have a bunch of naked necromorphs that have nothing on. And I wonder if those are the clones that had the rapid regrowth that just regrowthed into a giant-ass necromorph.
Could be. I mean, I think the biggest difference would be if they had a rig on them or not.
Good point.
Oh, speaking of which, there's a lot of those bodies in the wall that are kind of grafted into that creepy tumor-like flesh that starts growing everywhere.
Yeah,
and
it is.
so necromorphs are dead, but if you look at those bodies or those people or whatever you want to call it, their rigs are still registering blue, which means that the rig is considering them alive. So they might be consciously absorbed into
That's
this
interesting.
kind of hive mind creature.
Huh.
So
That could be the markers doing too.
if you think about that,
Yeah.
it's pretty horrifying the more you think about it. So maybe not think about it.
In talking about characters too, there's of course Altman, the person that Unitology was founded after, their Jesus figure. So there's a book actually written about him that's really interesting, called Martyr. And so it goes back 200 years and talking about the actual discovery of this thing, and Altman being a part of a research team with a government with government oversight going into the ocean where they found it to study the marker, which, thinking about it sounds a little like Annihilation. Government research project going into an area that warps your mind and makes you see things and go a little crazy. Very similar. And so the thing is, Altman wasn't affected by the marker at all. In fact, he couldn't understand why everyone else was being affected by it. But he deduced that the marker had some weird psychological field that as you got closer to it, warped it to a degree. Now, the black marker caused mass chaos. People were like fucking... When they finally figured out how to bring it up to the surface and bring it onto land, it made people go fucking crazy. Because it was so the thing about the black marker too is it's way bigger than the red markers. It's city size. If you were to... It's like a giant fucking... three skyscrapers mixed into one giant skyscraper. It is huge. If you put it in the middle of New York City, you would see it from any point in that city. It's big. Because it's a giant power source too. That was the original reason why they wanted to study it, was because they wanted to see if they could use it for energy renewal, because they were on an energy crunch to begin with, using up all of Earth's resources. They needed a good steady power source. But what it did was just turn everyone crazy. Like, people just started going crazy and killing each other. Which, of course, is what the black marker does, because that's how you create necrotic flesh to make the Brethren Moon. You know, it was already doing its thing. Altman realizes that this is a bad thing, and so he goes to resink it back into the ocean again so it can't bother anyone. But the leader of the military, like the military group that was outfitted to see them, he liked the power that it had and saw potential as a military usage. And so he had, working in tandem with, because at this time, EarthGov was working in tandem with Unitology when it was created, and then they had a falling off around the time that the Age of 7 marker was made, because then EarthGov was like, wow, this is really fucked up. We can't actually do anything with this. It just creates this bad thing. And Unitologists were like, no, this is what we want, though. And so they had this like big split. But before that, there was potential. And so they had Altman killed because he wanted to release to the public and be like, hey, this thing's actually fucking dangerous. It's an alien artifact that makes people go crazy. And monsters come out of this too. Like, we need to stay the hell away from it. But they ended up like killing him and using him as a martyr to create Unitology, to create a religion around it so it always stays center in people's minds so that they can get power.
Yeah, a little more history if we're going to get into some of the marker lore. I don't know if I should go all the way back to the creation of these things.
Let's leave Tau of Atlantis,
Yeah.
and Dead Space 3 stuff out of it, because I think 1 and 2 are really good stories in and of themselves.
Yeah, so the Earth history.
Yeah.
So, pretty much, this is what everyone's figured out. When the marker came to Earth, it was either on a meteorite or it was the meteorite. Mm-hmm. And it landed in the Gulf of Mexico, off the Yucatan Peninsula, which is a huge crater.
Yeah, well,
so they
believe that's the crater, I think, that
killed the dinosaurs. Yeah. So the idea is that when the marker hit Earth, it killed the dinosaurs. And it may have killed them because by design, the marker is meant to propagate intelligent species so that it can reproduce itself.
There were dead necromorphs floating around the area where they found it. So, and little necromorph fish too.
Yep. So the idea is that the marker's influence actually helped create humans as we are today. Mm-hmm. So it jump-started our evolution into being an intelligent species so that it could create minds intelligent enough to contain its coding and create more.
How very 2001: A Space Odyssey of them.
Yeah, it's pretty weird. So yeah, moving from there, I mean, so the same year, later in the year when Dead Space came out, there was a short miniseries. It's kind of a mess because I think there's
Are you talking about the movies Aftermath and?
No, there was like an actual like miniseries.
There was.
Yeah, it flew under the radar, so I think like 5 or 6 different studios worked on it. So the animation from episode to episode is crazy different, and I think that just also the game was so big and there was a lot of stuff happening. Yeah. So there's that. And then you have the 2009 Extraction, which is about Nicole and Mercer.
I think I'm not familiar with Wait, is Extraction the game?
Yes.
Yes. I never played Extraction, but I think so.
I think it's more puzzly. Then you had Salvage. This is a graphic novel, which is a prequel. And I guess there's a ship called the Hunter Moon that actually meets up with the Ishimura over Aegis. But Ishimura's already taken over with necromorphs. Mm-hmm. So bad news for them. And there's Dark Souls again, Dead Space Liberation, because I wrote DS on there.
How about that? How about that Shadow of the Erd Tree DLC?
Oh my god.
Yeah.
So Liberation is actually a prequel to the third installment. Then you have Martyr.
The book with Altman.
Yep. Then let's see. Oh yeah, there is. So in 2013, there was a live action film that was supposed to be announced, and apparently this was along with a lot of video game movies like Splinter Cell that were all announced in the same year that were guaranteed to come out, guaranteed to be huge blockbusters, greatest movie you've ever seen. And actually, going back, John Carpenter stepped out and publicly said that if there was a Dead Space movie to be made, he would personally want to direct it.
I want him to make a Dead Space movie. That would have been so cool.
And again, everything just fizzled out because it was around that time that EA pretty much killed all of their good franchises.
Yeah. Man, that sucks. I would have loved to see an actual Dead Space movie.
A good
especially
live
like John
action.
Carpenter. That would have been gory as fuck.
It would have been amazing. I guarantee.
It would have been the gore that you wanted from this kind of movie.
They probably would have put Sam Neill in it.
Sam Neill is Isaac Clarke.
Or at least he would be a good
No, he needs to be Isaac Clarke.
He would be one of the officers for sure.
I think he would make a good Isaac Clarke, or he would make a good Mercer.
Mercer would be fantastic.
I could see him as Mercer. Just see him like go crazy and do something fucking terrible. Him or that other dude from the other guy that goes crazy from Event Horizon, who turns into like the main antagonist. Or was Sam Neill the antagonist?
Sam Neill, yeah.
Okay, never mind. You know what? I'm tired.
Yeah, feel that. Let's see, what's next?
I think we pretty much covered it. I think we're good.
Yeah. Thank you for tuning in yet again.
Yeah, thank you for listening, following through with us as we talk about Dead Space. So one thing I want to do before we leave is if you like what we're doing and you want to see us grow in ourselves and grow through this podcast, we are starting a Patreon. We'll have a Patreon. There will be a link in the description to it. We're only going to have 2 tiers right now. One's like a $5 tier and one's a $20 tier. And both of them will get you the same thing. But, if you just feel like you really like us and you want to like give us some moolah, the $20 option is available. But either one, you're going to get the same thing. You'll get all of our episodes up front. We're going to be doing bonus segments as well where we watch things and comment on them. We'll do deep dives into things. The first one we're going to be doing is RRR. And after that, we'll leave that to you guys to decide, because I will also link an email. And if you want to give us suggestions, things to watch, things to play moving forward, that you would like to hear us comment on, we will throw that in the little suggestion area and see if we can work it in. But this has been your host, Brandon.
And this has been your host, Dakota.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. We put a lot of work into this, a lot of late nights, a lot of early mornings, a lot of...
and we both work a whole fucking lot on top of this, too.
Yeah, this has been quite the undertaking. I have a full-time job and a part-time job, and...
I just have a full-time job.
I definitely lose some sleep over this, and thankfully Brandon has been gracious to share the space with me. He's actually bought all of the equipment that we're recording with.
Yeah, baby.
He's been very generous of sharing that. Yeah, so hopefully this all works out for everybody, because we'd love to keep doing this for quite some time. We have a lot of things that we'd like to do in the future, and we'd like to be able to connect with y'all and be able to give you some entertainment.
Yeah, and be looking out for the next season. We'll be covering the Jedi series, doing Fallen Order. Yeah, we're Star Wars nerds up in this house.
I got to bring my lightsaber next time.
Yeah, we'll be doing Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor, and we'll be talking about the story structures of both. I'm excited because I really liked Fallen Order, but I liked Survivor, but I didn't like it as much as Fallen Order. I thought it had some really tight boss battles, better than Fallen Order. But somehow they did the gameplay I wasn't like a huge fan of. But we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll get to that later.
But till then, bye-bye.
Good night.